Hi everyone, we're just going to wait a couple of minutes just to get a few viewers on, and I'm just going to do some sharing of the broadcast across a few different pages and groups and things like that. So just hang a few minutes and then we'll get stuck into the main stuff. Just make sure I've got this.
I feel like we should have some music.
I can put music on, but I don't know if you'll be able to.
Don't worry, I'm only kidding.
You'll be able to hear it. All right, just get this shared into groups and stuff. What have we got? Event. So yeah, really looking forward to it, Jackie. You've got some really good info that we're going to be sharing. So hopefully everyone gets a lot out of it and helps them to regain control of their nutrition post-ISO. It's got one more group to share it in. Okay. All right, we've got one viewer on so far. So do we want to wait another minute or two?
Yeah, I'm sure people will watch afterwards as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Often, I believe what happens with these things.
Yeah.
So why don't we dive in?
Yeah. All right, let's get stuck into it.
All right, so I'm going to share my screen, okay? Ash, is that all right?
Yeah, go for it.
Now I've got to just work out how to do this.
So I think if I
all right. It's looking okay from your end?
Yep, all good. Perfect.
Lovely. All right, let's get going. Well, welcome everyone and those who are watching after we do this. So my name's Jackie Montefiore. I'm a GP 2 doors down from Ash's gym here in Paddington. I'm sitting in here at the moment. It's funny that we're doing this online, whereas we're physically quite close to each other, aren't we, Ash? So the miracles of the internet. So today I wanted to talk about regaining control of our nutrition post-ISO, and obviously isolation and social distancing and all the measures to control the COVID pandemic have been very good from a infectious diseases public health point of view. But a lot of people have struggled in terms of gaining a bit of weight and losing their routine with exercise and diet. So we just wanted to put this on today to help get you back on track with all of that. So a little bit about me. So I'm a medical doctor. I'm a GP based in Paddington, like I said. The thing that's different about me compared to most GPs is that I've actually got qualifications in nutrition and dietetics as well. And I used to be a dietitian before I went back to uni and studied medicine. I worked in different areas as a dietitian, including in weight management. But around the time of my pregnancies and having babies, I started to have my own weight struggles, which was quite disconcerting for me given all my training and experience. In recent years, I discovered more of a lower carbohydrate approach, which was really quite transformational to help me control my own weight in a healthy weight range. And I've been using that now as a major tool in my practice to help my patients do similar. So what I wanted to cover, just a little bit more about my practice. So I used lifestyle measures first and foremost to improve the health of our patients. So that's kind of our main crux of what we do. And when someone comes in, they're just as likely to leave with a meal plan as a script. But the beauty is I can do both, obviously being a medical doctor as well. So just a bit of information about any conflict or declaration of interest and disclaimer. So like I mentioned, I'm a principal GP at Sante Medical in Paddington, a practice that focuses on lifestyle interventions. We also here at Sante Medical offer a suite of other regular GP services that you're probably familiar with senior GP, skin checks, pap smears, scripts, referrals, all that sort of stuff. In conjunction with the weight management part of my practice, I've got an online program called Sante Circle, and I run that along with a health coach who's based in Melbourne. And that's designed to help educate and support people generally about using a low carb diet to improve their health. And I'm not being paid to present today. Just a medical disclaimer as well. So this presentation is just for informational purposes only. It's not designed to
what's happened
in your health regime or nutrition or pharmaceutical treatments. Please seek the advice of your doctor. So the COVID-15, so we mentioned this the other night when we were giving the little preview of this talk. So it's got a few different names. It's generally, I guess, more of a US term where it's referred to the 15 pounds people might gain during social isolation. What's that, Ash?
The freshman 15, I think is where it starts.
Yeah, the freshman 15. So in our system, it equates to about 7 or so kilos. So it's not uncommon that people have been describing that this has happened with them. And I think it's a few factors have come into the reason why, and we can probably all put forward why we think that might be. Number one, being stuck at home. If we've got kids, we're sort of stuck with homeschooling. There's some stresses associated with that. We might be trying to do things to occupy the kids and ourselves, like extra baking. Of course, the gyms have been closed, and so that can throw the exercise regime out a bit. Just the general stresses, especially when the pandemic was really ramping up, and we were seeing pretty scary pictures from overseas. Just all that stress about, what's going to happen here in Australia and with our loved ones who might be older or have comorbidities. And just that social isolation aspect, because humans are very social beings. We really rely a lot on interacting with others. I've just lost my screen share here, so let me try and bring it back. That was really weird. Let me see. Let's try again. All right. So a lot of people will turn to the conventional nutritional advice when they're trying to improve their weight, get back to what their pre-pandemic weight might be or what their ideal weight is. And that's generally the advice to eat less and move more. So that's what we consider as the conventional nutritional advice and what that's based on. And I would just challenge you, if you're kind of planning on using that again and it hasn't worked well for you in the past, just challenge you to say, well, how's that worked for you before? And so it might be worthwhile just kind of reframing and thinking of a different approach, because the reality is most people, and you just need to look at the statistics, most people who lose weight on a low calorie diet unfortunately tend to regain it, and usually with interest. And we can see this in the public health spend on different programs designed to try and achieve this in Australia. If you're old enough, like me, you might remember back in the day the Life Be In It program with Norm on the couch, and there's been various public health programs and a fair amount of health spend on this issue, yet BMIs on average in adults in Australia are tending to trend upwards. So today I wanted to go through some common nutrition myths and realities, and we're just going to go through through 3 today that I find are quite common. So the first one will be that we should follow a low fat or a low calorie diet to lose weight. That's probably the most common one that's still persisting. We need to eat regular meals to keep up our metabolism. And we need to rely on motivation to successfully lose weight. So we're just going to address those three, well, as they'll turn out to be myths, and I'll tell you why they're myths. All right, so the first myth is that we need to follow a low-calorie diet to lose weight. So this paradigm of eat less, move more is fundamentally unhelpful and doesn't result in long-term success for weight loss. And this is because when we chronically calorie restrict, so we aim to chronically have a low calorie diet, a few adverse effects happen in our body. So we get a lower basal metabolic rate. So that's just the rate of which our body burns energy at rest, not even including or what we do as exercise. It causes derangements in the hunger and full hormonal signaling in our body. And both of those together in our current food environment, full of tempting processed foods, tends to prime us for weight regain. And that's usually what we see. So you're probably familiar with the show The Biggest Loser. Was on a few years ago. There's been a few seasons. They get a group of contestants who are overweight and put them in this residential area, and they control the food that they're given. They put them on the low-calorie diet. They have personal trainers to prescribe exercises, a pretty high-intensity, high-volume exercise regime. And people do very well. They lose weight in the series, and you see the show at the end where the winner who's had the most weight loss. But a study was done that actually looked at the long-term likelihood of success of a group of The Biggest Loser contestants. And what they found was during the competition, the mean weight loss, or the average weight loss, was pretty good. It was about, nearly 60 kilos, you can see in this green graph. After 6 years, which is how long they followed them up in this study, unfortunately, the mean weight regain was about 40. So they unfortunately regained most of that weight they'd lost. But what's even more interesting about this study is that they showed this persistent change in resting metabolic rate. So at the end of the competition of 30 weeks of competition, they were burning on average 600 calories less than before they began. But after 6 years, even though they'd regained most of the weight they'd lost, they're burning even lower amounts of energy compared to baseline. So metabolically, they're actually worse off than when they began. A study published in the New England Journal of Medicine had a look at a group of people, and they looked at their circulating hunger and full hormones before and after a 12-month low-calorie diet. And they found that levels of ghrelin, so ghrelin is a hormone that's involved in hunger. I think of it like the stomach grumbling hormone, so ghrelin. So ghrelin was persistently higher in the participants 12 months after the program. And then on the other side of the coin, satiety hormone. So that's hormones that make us feel full. And there's quite a few of them. So there's in this study, they looked at peptide YY, cholecystokinin, and leptin, and they were significantly lower after that 12 months. So that's showing that these people are generally feeling hungrier after their weight loss program, and these hormonal changes are persistent indefinitely, and they start off immediately once one starts following the low calorie diet. So, and we know this from personal experience, when we try and do this, we feel hungry and we feel less energetic. So what's the solution then if it's not to chronically calorie restrict to try and create this energy deficit? And it's a little bit hard to see, but this figure on the right here shows this energy balance equation. So energy in, energy out, leading to either a stable weight, a weight loss, or a weight gain, depending which one is more or less. And so, we're led to believe that this is the way to go and to have a low-fat diet, because fat has the highest energy density per gram compared to the other macronutrients. So it has more than double the amount of energy per gram compared to carbohydrate. But the problem is that this is the wrong way to approach things, because it doesn't take into consideration the hormonal effects of the different macronutrients in the body. And what we find is, what's well known now is that carbohydrate has the most powerful influence on the hormone insulin in the body. Now, insulin you've probably heard of. People with diabetes, need to inject it to bring their blood sugar down. But what's less well known about insulin is that it's also a powerful fat storage hormone as well. So it's basically a hormone that's released in what we call the fed state. And carbohydrate has the strongest effect on the release of insulin in the blood compared to protein and fat. And you can see fat has the least influence on insulin. So I tend to think of insulin like a security guard at the ATM. So it's kind of standing there. And so your ATM, taking money out of the ATM is like mobilizing your fat stores. And so insulin's like the security guard who's waiting there next to the ATM and not letting you withdraw from your account or withdraw from your fat cells. So that's how it acts in the body. So the more often the security guard is around, the less able you are to withdraw from those fat stores. So my first tip is to really reduce sugars, starches, and grains as the most effective way of losing body fat, because that brings down the insulin in the blood. And to do this, we need to embrace natural unprocessed foods, including those higher in natural fats, whereas previously we might have feared those foods. So that would be, full fat cheeses, eggs, avocados, nuts, and oily fish. So it kind of goes counter to what, that conventional advice is. So let's move on to the next myth, that we need to eat regular meals to keep up our metabolism. So you've probably heard of this one, that we need to have 5 small meals a day and eat regularly to keep up our metabolic rate. And if we go too long in between meals, or if we skip a meal, our body will go into starvation mode and the metabolic rate will drop. But this is wrong. Or what really happens is that eating regularly actually promotes fat storage, because it's keeping the circulating insulin levels high. On the other side of the coin, if we're adding extra time in between meals, so doing a bit of intermittent fasting, or can be called time restricted feeding, it allows the insulin to come down, and it actually improves our metabolic rate, as is shown in the literature, because it increases what we call the counter-regulatory hormones. So these are the hormones that run counter to the hormone insulin. And some of these are growth hormone, adrenaline, noradrenaline, and cortisol. So we are always in there's this dichotomous state. It's like there's not one better than the other, and we need both. It's like yin and yang. So we're in either the fed or the fasted state. And in our current food environment, we're too often in the fed state. And that's promoting an insulin rise, which is leading to storing sugar, but also storing body fat. And over time, when we do that over many decades, that's where we can run into problems with health issues, including a rising blood pressure, tendency to develop type 2 diabetes and heart disease and other issues. So what we need to do is to try and consolidate our meals and avoid snacking in between meals. And here in this diagram, we can see if we're just eating within a 12-hour eating window and just having your 3 main meals, we at least get a little bit of time in between those meals during the day where we're going back into the green, into fat burning, and giving us a decent amount of time overnight. You can imagine if we're eating late into the night and we've been told then the following morning that we must have breakfast, or we need the fiber, or we need to get our metabolism going, we can see that green fat burning time overnight is going to be very limited. And what can be even more effective is to use more of like a 16-8 type of approach, where we might have an 8-hour eating window. So just having 2 meals a day, and then the rest of the time not eating, or just consuming fluids and teas and that sort of stuff. And that even extends the availability of time for the body to burn fat. That can work quite well. Not to say that, someone should do this all the time or dive into it if they're not used to it, but it can be something to work up to at least a couple of days a week. But the thing with intermittent fasting or time restricted feeding is that we don't want to overdo it as well. And I see sometimes people do that. So there's obviously concerns with, nutrient depletion if we're overdoing it. But the other thing that happens is that we get this, like I mentioned in the other slide, a release of the counter-regulatory hormones. And you're right, you might recognize the last three, adrenaline, noradrenaline, and cortisol, as being stress hormones. So if we've got a lot of stresses in our life, overdoing the fasting will add to that and actually be counterproductive. All right, so let's move on to the third myth, which isn't really nutrition related per se, but just a general myth. It's more like a different framing of your thinking. So to be relying on motivation to lose weight. And I often have people say, I just need the motivation, and look, I accept that motivation, we need it to get over or get past those initial behavioral change roadblocks, if you will. But in the end, we want to be moving towards relying on habits rather than motivation, because at some point motivation will wane. And if we've got some habits in place, that'll put us in better check. And they don't have to be major things. So it could even be just making sure on a weekly basis that we've thought of what meals we might be having. So you've got that weekly shopping habit, like maybe on a Sunday when I will tend to do it. Even on a daily basis, just at least thinking of what we might have for meals for that day. And so just a planning out of the meals habit, and that might be something you do the night before as part of a habit of a before bed type of routine. Or you might have a habit of a daily exercise. So first thing in the morning, part of your routine is getting up and doing some sort of activity, whether that's some training with Ash or just going for a walk. But you've got that aim to have that habit of exercise every day. So once you've got the habits in place, it's just something you do. It's not something that relies on that motivation every day. And if you miss the odd day, it's not a huge drama. You don't have to beat yourself up, but you're just getting back into that habit the next day. And so that's all I was going to cover today. So thank you, everyone who was listening. If you want any more help or any individual advice, you're welcome to come and see me. I'm doing this in the wrong order. So the last 2 points. So you're welcome to come and see me, or initially I'm tending to run appointments over telehealth. But then after that, you can come in person, but I'm trying to keep the long appointments over telehealth and just do the brief visits in person. So I'm just on Given Terrace, just next to Sultan's Kitchen, in between Sultan's Kitchen and Fita-U. And if you want a summary of some tips and a recipe that you can make in bulk to give you some healthy lunch meals, it makes up about 6 lunches and it's really quite tasty. You're welcome to go to that link and get those tips and the recipe, and that will sign you up to about 2 weekly emails where I'll send out updates and tips and some resources. At the moment, I'm running a 3-part podcast series where I'm explaining about cholesterol. So you'll get, updates about all of that. So I guess we've got time for some questions if anyone is keen.
Yeah, so thanks, Jack.
I feel like I've just had verbal diarrhea.
No, great. Rach, Hannah has a question. She said, with intermittent fasting, do you recommend a minimum calorie count to ensure your body doesn't go into like starvation mode or have like a reverse effect of starting to store body fat?
Not really a minimum calorie count. I tend to focus on nutrient density. So looking at nutrients to me is trumps looking at calories per se. So someone could do intermittent fasting and then refeed on like donuts and ice cream, and it still could work okay, but that will promote cravings and, be depleting your nutrient stores. Where if you then refeed on nutrient dense foods, you'll do better, and you'll be less likely. I mean, you're not, with that sort of regime of 16-8, you're not going to lose metabolic rate. If you do it kind of day in, day out, and you've got a calorie restriction, then you will. But if you're eating to satiety and fullness, it should work well. And if you're choosing those foods from nutrient dense sources, like those fresh foods, eggs, nuts, etc., then you'll be replenishing the nutrients that your body's after. Does that answer it?
Yeah, no, that was good. And Rach, you can probably give a little bit of feedback if you need a little bit more info, or if it didn't quite answer it, just pop a comment below. I guess one from me, with, say, you're someone who does, strength training. We do a lot of strength training here at Fita-U Performance Center. I guess like having with the carbohydrates, if you're needing, I guess, a little bit more of a boost up, especially in the morning, you're training early in the morning, what would you recommend as like a good, like quick, like uptake of carbohydrates in the morning to make sure that you're, I guess, able to get the most out of your training session, in that, for that day?
Well, to be honest, I would argue the need of a quick carbohydrate source in the morning. You can do quite well. Like, you could have a more, I guess, fibrous carbohydrate source the evening before, which will replenish your muscle glycogen stores. And then having that muscle glycogen turnover will help. But I would argue the need for a strength training session, and you might disagree with me, Ash, that you need a quick carbohydrate source around the time of that session. And again, it depends on your goals, but in my space, most people are wanting to lose body fat, and doing that isn't going to help them with that goal, because it's promoting a blood sugar rise, promoting an insulin rise, but you might be seeing a different population of people, Ash.
Yeah. So maybe more from like a pure performance goal, where you're needing, I guess, that uptake of carbohydrates, and you might be more inclined to have something. If it was, you're less about the fat loss goal, more about a performance goal than anything.
Yeah, sure. I mean, have some carbohydrate. I would still argue that you don't need the Gatorades and the the lollies and the things that we've been pushed to. Like, I did some training back in the day in sports nutrition, and that was very much, pushed that, we need all that, and we need that quick glucose. And I would think you can achieve that with real food. Yeah. Some fruit or a banana would be more than sufficient in doing that.
Yeah, more along the natural side rather than the sugary stuff. I definitely am not an advocate of the Gatorades and lollies first up in the morning, that's for sure.
Oh, yeah. But, yeah, I mean, again, in the whole sports nutrition sphere with the carb loading, I tried some of this myself, more in the context of endurance, so before doing a half marathon. And to get the volume of carbohydrate that was recommended to carb load, you couldn't do it with high fiber carbohydrates. The bowel didn't tolerate it. You literally had to have lollies and sugar to get that carbohydrate loading up. So it's really quite interesting when you sort of experiment with it, with what's recommended.
Yeah. I think, like, I've spoken to a few, I guess, friends, and also they own training studios and things like that, and they've done triathlons, and they said you end up with, like, it's like concrete gut is what they sort of call it, when they've had to load so much on that, really high sugar, I guess, base, like nutrition options to sort of get it. And they're like, you just feel blurred by the time you get to the start line. And yeah, they have found that they, when they just, I guess they do a little bit, they do a little bit more of a carbohydrate uptake, but it's just more from like a natural base food. They feel 10 times better for it. So it's more nutrient, obviously dense options.
Oh, definitely. And if you're doing your training, like in the months in the lead up to an event, they've shown and researched that the athletes who are best able to oxidize fat to fuel that activity will do the best because they're sparing their muscle glycogen stores for the end.
Yeah.
So, kind of there's an increasing recognition in sports nutrition of train low, race high. So train in a fairly low carbohydrate state to get your body better at burning fat. And then at the time of competition, then have a bit more carbohydrate to replenish those muscle glycogen stores. And so you've got something in the tank when you're going up the hill. So on the bike or something like that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Awesome.
Good.
Yeah, Rachel's just, she said probably, and not wanting to lose muscle mass is probably another thing, like especially if you're doing like an intermittent fasting, trying to, I guess, be able to maintain as much. Well, I guess when your goal is to maintain muscle mass,
yeah,
still being able
it shifts the strategy slightly, definitely. And like I said, that situation, or people asking me for advice in that sense, isn't all that common. So I'm usually talking to more of a fat loss type of perspective, or improving metabolic health, like if someone's got pre-diabetes or diabetes. So it is quite different.
Yeah, awesome. All right, great. I don't think we haven't got any more questions. Kate said thanks, really helpful, so that's great. But yeah,
thanks, Kate. Thanks for coming along.
Jackie's gonna pop the link to the recipes that you had, and also to
my tip sheet and a recipe. So yes, I will pop that into the comments after this. I'll get onto the group there and do that.
Yeah. Oh, Deb's got one last question. What foods are best to maintain muscle?
Generally, protein is obviously very important to maintain muscle. And again, some of the traditional protein recommendations have been a bit on the low side. But if you're, very active, you'll have that high protein turnover. Foods that are rich in protein, and the easiest sources and probably the most easily utilized sources are from animal sources. Like it or not, we can get it from plant sources, but we need to have the right combinations, and we'll be just getting extra fiber and carbohydrate with that. So they can work well if someone's a vegetarian or a vegan, but it's just biologically easier to get it from animal sources like your eggs and your fish and meat and chicken. But yeah, obviously nuts and legumes can come into play as well as good protein sources. So but again, I still think you can do it quite well using real foods and not having to rely too much on the Franken foods, the protein shakes and that sort of stuff.
They're a supplement, not a staple to anyone's diet. That's what I always say with the protein powders. Like, I think it's good. It does definitely help to hit your protein goal, and I sort of always recommend that 1.8 to 2 grams per kilo, especially if you are
me too,
training 4 to 5 days per week. And the protein powder, I'm like, look, if you're needing to bump it up there, include it, but don't make it a 3 times a day sort of thing.
Yeah, definitely. And again, your population might be trying to gain muscle. Mine, who might be trying to lose weight, I tend to get them to limit like the liquid calories, including the smoothies and the protein shakes. So it just depends on the overall goal.
Yeah, definitely. All right, thanks so much, Jackie. And if you're jumping on here, I guess post live, be sure to pop your questions below, and we'll be able to get back to you as soon as we can.
Yes, great. Thanks for having me, Ash. Thank you, everyone. Have a good weekend.
Thanks for jumping on. Yes,
okay,
you too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah.